Going to be starting momentarily on Dalet Amud Aleph. Okay. I'm just going to start with a very quick review. All right, and then we'll go into our new material. The discussion, remember, revolved around the fact that the crossbeam for the Mabui could not be more than 20 amos. We saw that the question was between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda, whether it was an issue of what was the model to define an opening, a doorway. Okay, let's use opening as a better word. Okay, was it the entrance to the ulam, the entrance hall, the antechamber, or was it the entrance to the hechal, the sanctuary itself? Remember, the antechamber had a doorway, an opening that was 40 amos high. And then it had the fancy cornice on top, okay? That was not necessarily the case with the entrance to the hechal that was only 20 amos high, okay? By the way, a reminder that the width of those openings also may come up to be an issue that the Gemara is going to have to deal with, okay? And so the Gemara then went on to say, well, what was measured? How much was an amma? Was it 5 tfachim or was it 6 tfachim? And we were finishing at the end of the last amud with a statement, right, in the name of Rav Nachman, just reviewing there, okay, saying that amot were by 6 amot, okay, and not 5.
Tvachim.
Right, not 5 tfachim, right, okay, whether one was the hands were spread out, the fingers were spread out, okay, if I can do it like that, or whether the fingers were close together like that, right? And then we finished Meitivei. A challenge was raised, right? They objected. Kol amot she'amru chachamim ba'ama bat shisha. All the amot were 6 tfachim amot, ubilvad shelo yiyu mechuvanot, so long as they were not precise, right? Morning, Bob. Okay, good. All right, so that's where we left off yesterday. Okay, so we're picking up, as I said, on Dalet Amud Aleph, top, Bishlema l'Rabba, ki hechi de lahavyan halalu suchakot. Okay, that seems reasonable, understandable according to Rava, right? Who was interpreting Rav Nachman, okay? Because these were sochakot, fingers spread, v'halalu atzuvot. Yes. And the others, okay, namely for the sukkah measurement, those could have been 6, but the fingers were tight. Ela Abaye kasha. But for Abaye's explanation of Rav Nachman, that's problematic. Okay? Amalach Abaye. So Abaye would say Ema. I might say, all right, Emet Klayim Ba'ama Bat Shisha. That a area, right, that is for the, let's call it the Amma units for Kalayim, okay, could also have been 6, right? 6 tfachim. Vahamidikatani Seifa. But here, however, says the Gemara, challenging it. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Kol amot she'amru chachamim b'klayim ba'ama bat shisha. That Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is saying that the Amma units identified by the Chachamim, particularly for Kalayim, okay, which we saw previously, everybody seemed to agree that those were 6 tefach, whereas other times were 5 tefachim. But here he's saying the sages said they were 6 tefachim. Ubilvad shelo yihiyu mitzum samot. So long as they aren't going to be precise. In other words, right? Specific, tight, all right? The tight ones. Miklal, the Tanakama, kol amot ka'amar. Based on the inference that Tanakama was saying all the Amma units refer to a 6 tefach measure. Amar lach Abaye. And so Abaye now again comes to, to respond one more time. V'lav mi'ika Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Wasn't it not certainly Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Dekai Kavate, who seems to agree with me? Okay. In other words, that it could have been a 6 tefach Amma. Ana the Amrei Karabin Shimon Gamliel. Because I can say that I made my statement, my explanation Abaye for Rav Nachman, based on the view of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Okay. So the Gemara wants to now clarify. Okay. So the Abaye vadai tana'aihi. For Abaye, there certainly seems to be a machloket Tanaim here. The Rabba mi lema tana'aihi. For Rabba, are we going to say that he also felt that there was a machloket Tanaim here? Is that possible? Okay. So again, it seems to be unclear. Back again, whether we're talking about a 6 tefach amma, whether that's only for Kalayim, or whether that is in general the measurement for amma. Okay. Amar lach Rava. And so Rava's got to answer now. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, as far as the view of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, okay. Ha ata la'ashma'inan amat kla'ayim lo yitzam tseim. So his response here, okay, that the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, when he made his statement, really was applying it to the 6 tefach amma for Kalayim, and that it did not have to necessarily be precise. Okay, so it could be that it wasn't the tight finger, let's call it for a moment, example, but maybe even the open hand. Okay, which said could be a sizable difference there. All right. Velema, and let him say emat klayim lo yitzam tseim. So if that's the case, if that was what Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel meant, let him say what he means. Let him simply say that the amma unit for Kalayim, okay, was such that it was not loose, precise. It could be the loose one. Ba'ama bat shisha lema'ute mai. So the Gemara asks them, so if he's referring to a 6 tefach amma, what does that exclude? Lav lema'ute amat sukkah va'amat mabui. Doesn't it therefore come to exclude our example of what an amma is for a sukkah, or the amma is for the crossbeam of the alleyway, right? Those could then still be 5 tefach amma. No, says the Gemara. Lema'ute amma yisod va'amma sovev. No, it says this comes to exclude the amma units that were used to measure the yesod, the base of the mizbeach, okay, and the sovev, and the, what I'm going to call the ledge, the walkway, okay, around the Mizbeach. Why? Dichtiv, because we have a pasuk, right, that gives these items. And now remember, the pasuk is going to come from Yechezkel, okay, and not necessarily from Chumash, okay. So it says, "Ve'ela midot hamizbeach ba'amot." All right, ama v'tefach v'chet ha'ama v'ama rochav u'gvola al sifta. Right, again describing this measurement in English, and these are the dimensions of the altar in Amos, an ama and a tefach. Right, go over, right. In terms of the implication would seem to be the 5 tefach measurement, right? V'chek ha'ama v'ama rachav u'gvula al sifta saviv zaret ha'echad v'zeh gav ha'mizbeach, right? And then it continued. And the base, the ama, the width of the ama, and its border to the edge all around should be 1 span, all right, half an amma. V'zeh gag ha'mizbeach, and that's the top of the mizbeach. So Gemara is clarifying, chei ka'ama, when it refers to chei ka'ama, zeh yesod, that's the base, okay? Va'ama rachav, zeh sovev, and that when it says that the amma was the width, that's the ledge. Ugvula al sfata saviv elu hakranot. That's the let's call them the horns on the top of the mizbeach.
In the corners.
Right, on the corners, right. V'zeh gav hamizbeach. Zeh mizbeach hazahav. And when it refers to the end, that's the golden altar that's inside the heichal, inside the sanctuary. Okay. So we have really not gotten anywhere in terms of defining so far at this point, whether we're talking about a 6 tefach amma, which is that only for Kalayim, or is it in general, as opposed to a 5 tefach amma, which we might say is applicable for sukkah or for the mabui, right? Amar Rabbi Chia. So Rabbi Chia now, okay? Rabbi Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav, in the name of Rav, is going to give us another attempt to determine what's going on. And in this case, what we're going to see is a whole different, I don't want to say machloket, but a different direction of these, on this issue of measurements. So, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Ashi Amar Rav, shiurin, okay, the measurements, chatzitzin umachatzitin, okay, and regarding these issues, not only measurements, but chatzitzin, any kind of chatzitza, any kind of interposition, umechitzin, okay, and any kind of partitions, right? Halacha l'Moshe miSinai. These were halacha l'Moshe miSinai, given Moshe orally at Sinai, and are not in the Torah. Says Chia bar Ashi, in the name of Rav. And now what is he going to see? The Gemara raises a question. Shiurin d'oraitahu? Are you saying then that that these measurements, okay, regarding that there's a biblical source, right? Dichtiv eretz chita u'se'ora v'gomer. But we'll cite a pasuk right? That says a land of wheat and barley and etc., etc., etc. Okay, the whole pasuk, a land of wheat and barley and vines and figs and pomegranates, a land of oil producing olives and date honey. That's the note in Art Scroll on 48222. Okay, now what's going to happen, as we're going to see, if he says this verse is the basis for shiurim, okay, he's going to cite each aspect of the pasuk and show how that applies to a shiur. Okay. V'amar Rav Chanan, says Rav Chanan, kol hapasuk hazeh l'shiuri ne'amar. According to Rav Chanan, okay, this particular pasuk verse that we just cited was entirely presented for the purpose of giving measurements. And let's see the examples. Number one, chita, l'kedatan, okay, so wheat, as it was taught, hanichnas lebeit hamenuga, v'kelav, one who enters into a house that has been struck with tsaras, okay, and his garments, okay, al ktefav, his garments are being carried on his shoulders, v'sandalav v'tabotav biyadav, and he's also hand carrying his sandals and his rings, etc., in his hand. Hu vehem tme'im miyad. He and these items become impure, become tameh immediately. Haya lavush kelav v'sandalav v'raglav. If, however, he was wearing his clothes and his sandals were on his feet, v'taba'otav ba'etzba'otav, and he had his rings on his fingers, hu tameh miyad, he becomes immediately tameh. Vehein tohorin ad sheyish'eh b'chdei achilat paras. But his other items, the clothes, the rings, the shoes, the sandals, they do not become tameh unless he remains in that sarad house enough time to have eaten a half a loaf of bread. Okay? Pat chitin, when we're referring here to a half a loaf of wheat bread, velo pat seorim, and not a half a loaf of barley bread. Okay, so what happens? Right, so the Gemara continues, Mesav ochel biliptan. Not only that, but he has to eat it by dipping it into relish. Okay, all right. Now, that was the first item from the pasuk, wheat. Now we're going to get to barley, seorah. Okay, how do we show that that was used as a shiur? Ditnan is taught elsewhere in a Mishnah. All right, the following, right? Etzem kiseorah metame b'maga u'b'ma'asa ve'eino metame ba'ohel. Namely, we're saying here that a measurement of a bone the size of a barley corn is what's going to render, according to the Mishnah, a person tameh, either through direct contact with it or by carrying it, okay? Even if he doesn't touch it directly, okay? But it does not render or share its tuma in tumas ohel, okay? And simply under a common roof. Okay? Next example, okay, is from the pasuk. Okay, we said could be vines, right? Geffen, kadei revi'it yayin l'nazir. Okay, so what is the minimum measure by which a nazir could be flogged for drinking wine? The minimum amount is, that's what the Geffen refers to, okay? Is that it's a revi'is, right? Geffen kedei revi'is yayin l'nazir. And the amount of a revi'is. Okay? Let's go over to Amud Beis. The next item after vine was figs, te'ena. Okay, top of the Amud. Kigro Geret, Lahotzaat Shabbat. Why? Because we're saying here that it's the amount of a dried fig bulk, okay, that one would be transgressing in terms of carrying from one rishus to another on Shabbat. Next example in our pasuk, okay, again, was pomegranates, rimon, Kiditznan, again, is taught in another Mishnah. Kol klei ba'ale batim. Okay, here we're saying utensils that belong in a home to the average householder. Okay, if those utensils have a hole in them the size of a pomegranate, shiurin kirimonin. That's what we mean when we say that their measurement is by pomegranate. If the hole is in the utensil, it means the utensil is not usable, and therefore it's not considered a utensil and can't be makabel tuma. Next example, eretz zayit shemen udevash. Okay, our pasuk referred to land producing oil from olives and date honey. Okay, eretz shekol shihureha kazeitin, says the Gemara. It's a land where all of its measurements are based on a olive amount. So Gemara raised questions. Kol shihureha sagadaaka. You think all of its measurements are based on an olive amount? Vaha'ika hani da amran. But what about all of these that we just said? Ela ema, but rather I would say, eretz shirov shihureha kazeitin, a land in which the majority of its measurements is based on an olive amount. Okay. Next example was honey, right? Date honey. Devash kikotevet hagasa. Okay, there we're talking about the size of a large date, right? Liyom HaKippurim. And that applies to Yom HaKippurim, the amount of food stuff that one would have had to have eaten on Yom HaKippurim in order to be transgressed, to be over on the issue of eating. Okay? So the Gemara then says, okay, even though he gave this drasha and presented this pasuk that used these items as shiurim, okay, here previously they said it was halakha l'Moshe miSinai. Here someone else gives a drasha saying that it's based on psukim, a pasuk. V'tispara shiurin michtav kativi, asks the Gemara, right? You really think that with regards to these measures, they're actually written here in this pasuk? Ela hilchata ninhu va'asmachinhu rabbanan akrai. But rather, we'll say that it was a halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai. However, the rabbis simply relied on this pasuk as a ismachta, okay, as a hook, so to speak, right? So that was what we first said, all right? However, okay, what we saw, right, was the fact that he had indicated that measurements and interpositions, okay, as well, Okay, we're all Halacha Moshe Sinai, right? And okay, so we're going to get to and partitions. That was the view of Rav Vichia Bar Ashi. Okay, so we're now going to get to this particular piece, right? Chatzitzin, when we're talking about interpositions, interruptions. Okay, deoraita ninhu. Shall we say that these were also have a source in the Torah itself? Dichtiv, as it's written, v'rachatz et kol b'saro b'mayim. When it says that the has to wash the entire body in water, right? Okay. What does it mean, his entire body? Right? Shelo yehe davar chotzetz bein b'saro l'mayim. Understanding it that there should not be any kind of interruption, okay, between the water and his flesh. B'mayim, b'mei mikvah. And when we say in the water, we means in the water of the mikvah, the gathered waters. Kol b'saro, all of his flesh. Mayim shekol gufo ole bahem. It implies water where the entire body covers it. V'kamahen, and how much is that, asks the Gemara? Amma al amma. We say it's one amma, one direction, one amma, another direction. Barom shalosh amot, and a depth of 3 amos. V'shiaru chachamim me mikvah arba'im seah. And the sages determined that a gathering, a collection of water, that would be 1 amma by 1 amma, okay, and 3 amos deep, all right, that would be the equivalent of 40 seah, right? Ki itzdarich hilchata, asks the Gemara. So here then, we ask, okay, so if that's the case, why do we need any kind of reference that this is halacha l'Moshe Sinai? Okay, l'se'aro, it's because of the person's hair. U'kedarabba bar Rav Huna, the amar Rabba bar Rav Huna, because as Rabba bar, in the view of Rabba bar Huna, who says as follows, Nema achat kishura, that if one has a single hair and it is knotted, let's say, let's use that term for a moment, chotzetzet, it is an interposition, right? Shalosh, if there are 3 hairs, einan chotzetzet. Okay, 3 hairs are not going to make an interposition, an interruption for the water to get through. Shtayim, 2 eini yodea, 2 I don't know. So Gemara, however, asks, Se'aro, right? Nami deoraitahi. Do we say then that here too has a scriptural basis? Titania, because we have a braita that teaches v'rachatz et kol b'saro, and it says, and he has to wash all of his flesh, namely et, with the word et, hatafel leb'saro, that which is also subordinate to his flesh. V'zehu se'ar, and that refers to his hair. So the Gemara then asks, ki ha'atai hilchata, okay? So it wants to know, why then do we have this issue of halacha l'Moshe Sinai? Again, what does it come to prove? Lirubo, lami'uto, ulemakpid, L'she'ein makpid, right? It comes to deal with an issue of majority and minority, for one who is particular and for one who is not particular. Ukeda Rabbi Yitzchak, and it follows the view of Rabbi Yitzchak. The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, who says, Devar Torah, the Torah specifically says in a law, Rubo umakpid alav chotzetz, namely that if the interposition covers the majority of his body, okay, if somebody has a, I'll call it an ink stain, okay, let's use that as an example, and it's on the majority part of his body, umakpida, and he's particular about it, chotzetz, then it's an interposition for that person. V'she'eno makpid, but if he's not particular about it, okay, she'eno makpid alav, eino chotzetz, it's not considered then a interposition for him. V'gazru al rubo, and the rabbis made a gezerah, a decree, in terms of the majority of body, she'eino makpid mishum rubo hamakpid, and they made it a interposition, a rabbinical decree, okay, the Rabbanan, that even though the person may not be particular about it, it will still be an interposition based on the idea of it being covering the majority of the body and the person being particular. Va'al miuto hamakpid, asks the Gemara, so what about where it's only a small part of the body and the particular person is particular? Mishum rubo hamakpid, and they also made their gezerah applying even to a small amount on the body and the person is particular. So the Gemara asks the following, or suggests initially the following. V'ligzor nami al mi'ito she'eino makpid. So why don't the rabbis then make a decree also when the stain, we'll say, or whatever it is only on a small part of the body and the person is not particular about it? Mishum mi'ito hamakpid, based on the idea that even when it's the small part of the body and the person is particular, it is considered a interposition. Inami, or perhaps also, okay, a decree, mishum rubo she'eino makpid, or where it's on a larger part of the body and the person isn't particular. Gemara says, he gufa gezerah. That in itself was a decree, right? Va'anan mikum v'nigzor gezerah l'gezerah. And are you saying that we should come and make one decree on another decree? Okay. So we end that item there. We now go to the third issue, which we said was partitions, walls, whether they are also halacha l'Moshe miSinai or from the Torah. Mechitzot, okay, d'oraita ninhu. Shall we say then that laws governing walls are from the Torah or halacha l'Moshe miSinai? Right? The Amar Mar, as the master has said, excuse me, Aron Tisha, okay, namely that the ark itself was 9 tefachim, the kaporet tefach, and the, let's say the cover, the lid, was another tefach, harei kan asara, so that would make it 10 handbreadths high, right? Lo tzricha the Rabbi Yehuda. says the Gemara. That was only necessary, okay, based on the view of Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar, who says, Amar binyan ba'ama bat shisha, says that when it talked about the building, right, of the Beis Hamikdash, of the Mishkan, really, okay, that they were talking about an Amah of a 6 tefach. Amat kelim ba'amah bat chamisha. But the Amah measurement for any of the, let's call it utensils, vessels, okay, of the Mishkan, was a 5 tefach Amah. Ula Rabbi Meir, but according to Rabbi Meir, the Amar kol ha'amot hayu beinonit, that all of the Amah measurements were, let's call it 6 tefach, okay? But when he says 6, he says medium, okay? In a sense, that's sort of between the extended fingers and the closed fingers, right? My ikalamema. What then do you say? Okay. That's what he meant by the, so to speak, medium 6, right? The Rabbi Meir, ki atai hilchata lagud. No, says the Gemara. It would appear that for Rabbi Meir, what does he use the idea that that this halacha l'Moshe miSinai, that measurements were orally given to Moshe, for the following. He used it lagud, in other words, for the extensions, right? To extend the wall. The libud, okay, the levud, namely for the question of joining gaps. Uledofen akuma, and for the idea of a wall for a sukkah that extends and bends over to become on the top part a little bit of the schach of the roof, that as a curved wall for a bent for a sukkah, applying there. Okay. Now, our Gemara is now going to go back really to our one of our more earlier discussions. Remember, all of this was prompted by the issue of that height of the crossbeam for the mabui. Okay, how high did it have to be? So Gemara is now going to say the following. What about a following situation? Haya gavoa me'esrim ama uba lema'ato kama mema'et. Okay. Let's assume for the moment that our crossbeam for that mabui going from the alley into the Rishus Harabim, okay, is above the 20 amos. And we said, according to at least Tanakama, it had to be reduced. How much? Right? That's part of our question. Kama mama'et. How much does it have to be reduced, says the Gemara? Kama detzrichle. However much that's needed. Ela rechavo bekama. But maybe we're questioning really not simply the height, but how wide does it have to be? Rav Yosef Amar Tefach. Rav Yosef says, okay, it must be at least the crossbeam has to be at least the right width of 1 tefach. Okay. Abai Amar Arba'ah, and Abai says it has to be 4 tefachim. Lema Bahaka Miflagei. Should we say this is what they're arguing about? Demand Amar Tefach, that one, Rav Yosef, who says a single hand breath is sufficient. Kasavar mutar lishtamesh tachet hakora, is of the opinion that it is permissible to utilize the space underneath that board, underneath that crossbeam, to carry underneath it, etc., etc. Right? Tachet hakora. Just go over just a little bit. Uman da'amar arba'a kasavar asur. And it was Abaye who says that it had to be 4 tfachim, right? It seems to be of the opinion, asur lehishtamesh tachet hakora, right? That it is forbidden to utilize that space directly under the beam. Okay? Okay. Why? Because we could say that the area beneath the beam, okay, if we say it's sealed, okay, in other words, that it's an actual partition, then you can't use anything underneath it, right? That would be Abaye's argument. Okay. Now we'll go just a tiny bit low. The kuli alma kesavre mutar lehishtamesh tachet hakora. Okay. No, everybody seems to agree, says that it is permissible, Rav Yosef and Abaye, to carry under the crossbeam. Ubaha kamiflage. And this is what they're going to be arguing about, okay? Coming back to something we saw before, Ubaha kamiflage, mar savar kore mishum heker. One holds that the crossbeam is simply, let's say, a reminder, a visual reminder. Umar savar kore mishum mechitza. And the other, namely Abaye, holds that it's an actual, sets up an actual partition. Okay? And that's where we're going to stop right there today. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Everybody stay well, okay, and take care, okay? And we'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. So Rabbi, on Sunday we start.
Well, I'm going to check again with Andrea
Okay.
how much time we have. In other words, do we have simply from 8:15 to 9:15?
Right.
Or do we have some flexibility? In other words,
Okay.
all right, and I'll let everybody know tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. Be
Take
well.
care.